I'll hand over to Ben to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for giving up some of your day to be with us. My name's Ben McLean. I head e-commerce for DHL in the UAE. Before I made a run for the sun, I used to work for DHL 15 years ago back in the UK. So thanks for having me on today.
Cheers, Ben. And over to Baki.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Baki. I'm the Middle East Operations Director. I've been here in the Middle East for 23 years and with DHL for 30 years, both in the UK, Italy, and another couple of postings across Europe. So it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Thank you so much. So we have a jam-packed agenda today. Ben is going to cover off the Middle East e-commerce market and the huge opportunity there is for UK retailers. Then Baki will be talking about the DHL Express network, so how we're going to get your shipments over to the Middle East and our extensive investments that we're doing over in the region. We've then picked out some key countries that have seen some fantastic e-commerce growth in the past couple of years and some intricacies in those countries and how you can really expand into those. And then we'll have a discussion at the end with myself, Ben and Baki, with a couple of questions that we have. And then hopefully we'll have some time to take some questions from you guys, the audience. There is a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. If you just enter your questions into there, then I'll be able to go over them at the end. So let's just get right into it. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Kerry. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone joining again. And yeah, look, I've got the opportunity to really talk about the Middle East. It's a very interesting story and pleased to share it's a very positive one. I think the overall economic outlook of the Middle East is very, very positive. So let's dive into the details and I'll give you a run through what I see as key areas of interest to you. And really the objective, I suppose, is webinars to not only give you insights, but if you're not selling today into the Middle East, hopefully you will decide to do so. So again, open for questions at the end if I don't cover anything. And, again, reach out to your account manager if you want some more details. So the Middle East continues to be one of the fastest growing regions in the world, along with South America. The overall outlook is very, very positive. The market addressable audience is around 400 million people. So it's a big region. Like any other region around the world, we felt the impact of COVID, but in a very positive way. It had a big change on the whole e-commerce landscape. If you're familiar with the Middle East, we socialize and tend to purchase and do our social activities really around shopping malls. So the fact that channel wasn't available during COVID, it meant a lot of merchants and retailers had to really rethink how they sort of connect with the end consumer by having a digital presence. As a result of that, it really changed the digital landscape and it really pushed people to change to more of a digital payment option. So all of that happened during COVID. I'm really pleased to say that a lot of those shoppers have continued to buy online. If you look at the demographics underneath, it's a real mixture of both locals and expats. In some of the countries in the region, we have more expats than locals, which is very interesting. We have the highest internet penetration in the world. In a lot of the countries, we have double handsets, so very easily set up for mobile commerce. I would say that the Middle East is one of the most socially connected regions in the world and becoming very fastly, very socially conscious as well. So which is a good sign. So you put all these things together and the fact that you've got an audience that have very high disposable income, pay little to no tax, are very digital natives in their thinking. I think it creates a wonderful opportunity for UK merchants and sellers to really explore this region. And if you look at the slide in the bottom left-hand corner, that really talks to the momentum we've seen over the last 2 years, with a market size of $17 billion US dollars in terms of spend online in 2020 on products, moving to 28 million in 2022. And that's expected to increase by 11% year on year. So that's a very, very healthy number in comparison to some of the other regions around the world. And if you look in the middle, you can actually see on a category level which individual categories make up the biggest percentage of online sales in the region. You can see that electronics is number one at 35%. What we find is typically electronics tend to do very well through the marketplaces. We have two really big ones here, obviously one Global, as in Amazon, who you'd be familiar with, and we have a local marketplace called Noon, which is set up here in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Both offer a direct-to-consumer model, so you can still keep your products in the UK and test the waters and start to explore selling into those markets, not just for electronics, but other products as well. But we find that that's the go-to channel or sales channel. Interesting, we're seeing a lot of activity socially around TikTok for electronics as well, especially refurbished, reusable items as well. So that's something we're exploring at the moment to get a bit more insights. And then just moving on to fashion, you can see their fashion second place at 31%. Fashion does very, very well from a cross-border perspective. We see a lot of volume coming in from Asia, Europe, and US, in particular the UK brands. And when I'd break that into three categories, first I would say your luxury. There's a real, I would say, high-end market in the Middle East, so luxury does particularly well. Then the second one I would say is really about pre-loved vintage. So again, the same type of customer, but again, very socially conscious. So very happy to trade and buy new items and unique pieces. And really lastly, fast fashion, which again, like any other region, will do particularly well. And then lastly, really there in 10% is beauty. So I'm sure you'd be familiar with Sephora. They're the big retail outlet here in the region. And in terms of a dedicated beauty marketplace, we have Faces. So again, it's another really good option if you want to test a direct-to-consumer model without having to set up your own website. That's a really good option to see what the audience is looking for and how you can interact with the end consumer. And the social platform of choice really for beauty is Instagram. And then you can see 24% is made up by the other categories. Lastly, on the right-hand side, how you read this table is really about the percentage of online sales versus offline, 21 versus 22. So you can see that electronics are in first place with 25% of all purchases actually happen online. But the one I really want to sort of stress on is fashion. You can see that we doubled fashion last year from 5% to 10%, but when you compare that to other markets, it's still very, very low. And then when you look at others, the same again. So what that tells us is a lot of opportunity. Not only are consumers now looking to go online and they're purchasing for the first time, there's a lot of opportunity in some of these categories to really increase the percentage of sales online versus offline. So obviously, as a merchant looking to expand into UAE, these are areas I would definitely, if you're in those categories, are definitely big opportunities for you. Okay, so I'm going to touch on really some insights about the Middle East, just to reconfirm what I've been talking about. So what we expect to see in the Middle East over the next sort of 4 years is that it will continue to grow around 11%. The global average is expected to be about 8.9. So we continue to be leading the field in that area. The consumer in the region tends to shop on mobile commerce. So if you have your own website, make sure it's been enabled for a handset. And you can see 70% of consumers would prefer to shop on mobile. Interestingly here as well, the uptake in apps is really good. So a lot of consumers like to use apps. So if you're a subscription-based business or you have regular customers, that's a really good channel to go as well. And you can see there 50% of consumers will basically purchase cross-border outside the region. Depending on the category, for example, electronics, if you remove that, then you'll find that number's higher. If it's fashion, it could be as high as 70%. And the really good news is DHL can manage your promise from point of collection to the Middle East in 2 to 3 days. Becky will dive into that in a little bit more detail. But the message I really want to stress here is you have the full option on-demand delivery so the customer can manage their choice. It's DHL managing the final end delivery. So it's DHL that remember at the door, delivering your promise. And really lastly, from a consumer perspective, we are your extended call center as well. So we're available in those countries, talking local language, at the available times they're looking to. So not only can we help you expand, we manage that promise end to end for you as well. Okay, so I spoke about really the Middle East and what we see actually happening in terms of growth. So we refer to the Gulf, so the Gulf region, which is Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar. And then we have Israel. Israel's quite a new lane for us. Typically that serves from Europe. A lot of the Middle East countries don't necessarily are open for business for Israel, but the really good news is trade links between UAE and Israel is very, very positive. But really what I want to focus on this slide is the opportunity for you as a merchant expanding into the region. Saudi's a real powerhouse. I'll touch on that in a minute. But there's around 40 million people in the kingdom, and you can see there's a very, very positive outlook of 17% compound growth over the next 4 years. And you will find against a lot of the more mature countries around the world, you will not see that level of growth. And in particular in the high basket values as well. UAE steady at 11.5. And then the rest of GCC countries all showing positive double-digit growth as well. Okay, so I'm going to deep dive into the UAE. Most people are familiar with the UAE, so it's normally the market they go to first if they want to sort of tap in to the region. The great thing is if you set up a business and you're adding the UAE to your options on checkout, then if you start to localize the website, for example, Arabic or payment gateway, then you can pretty much expand very easily into the other countries in the region. In most cases, it's English, supported by Arabic. Preference would be Arabic to be available on there, but I think the UAE is a really good market to sort of test the waters. And again, you can see similar to the regional picture, 2019, the overall e-commerce market spend was 2.6 billion. You can see we've jumped up to 5.9. So you can see that accelerated growth over the last 4 years. And again, it's a very positive outlook. Dubai Chamber of Commerce expect that number to reach 8 billion by 2025. And the UAE being the trade hub for the region, we expect that to have a very positive impact on other surrounding countries across the Gulf. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the makeup of the end consumer in the UAE, there's around 10 million, that's our population. Around 80 plus to 90% is actually expats. So there's a lot of Brits living out here like myself. And interesting, what we've seen over the last sort of 1 to 2 years has been more billionaires moved to the UAE than anywhere else in the world. So there's a lot of end consumer out there with a lot of disposable income. And underneath really what's fueling that, we've seen the digital landscape change, as I mentioned earlier. Buy now, pay later has really taken off over the last 3 or 4 years. So there's a lot of different options. DHL has its own partner on the ground called Tabby, and we work very closely together. And we've seen a lot of merchants now offer this as a solution to their end consumer. So again, I believe you have that solution in Europe. For an example, would be equivalent someone like Klarna. And again, 100% internet penetration. So, the individuals, the consumers, very, very well connected. Have 2 handsets. Socially connected. So again, you're able to reach them. They are online a lot, and they are making a lot of purchases. So overall, the message I really want to share is that UAE is in really, really good shape. Okay, just continue along the same theme around the UAE consumer. So I want to sort of just give you a bit of an idea, flavor of the consumer behavior. And really the message I want to share here is the UAE consumer is open to shop cross-border. You can see that 12% of consumers will shop only cross-border. But if you combine that with consumers that purchase domestically and cross-border, that's north of 60%. So that's a huge addressable audience for you. And really what drives that, you can see there's the main reasons. So the consumer's looking for a wider range of products. Maybe that product they're looking for is not available with the brand, size, whatever it may be. So they're looking for more options, more depth, more range. Also, what I really want to point out is the consumer's looking for cheaper prices. So to give you an idea, I follow this very closely, live in the UK, trying to send money back, or living in the UK previously, sending money back home now. I'm always looking at exchange rates. So when I moved here to the UAE back in 2008, it was about 7.4 dirhams to the pound. And now it's about 4.5. So the GCC currencies are typically pegged to the US dollar. So now we've seen the pound weakening. A lot of the consumers are interested in the products from the UK. So I will buy something there purely because even if it's available, because of the currency reduction, I can get a lot more for my money. Equally, the consumer's looking for higher quality items. Maybe those products are not available here. There's a big affiliation between the GCC countries. I'm talking about UAE here, the locals. They will tend to go to the UK, they will shop, they will purchase, in particular London. So they're familiar and expecting higher quality items. And last but not least, the non-availability in the local market. Whilst we have the big marketplaces here, they don't have the depth and range in the assortment that you would see in Europe or US. So whilst you see the headline products being available, the real depth is not there for the end consumer. Okay, I'm sure everyone's really familiar with the e-commerce calendar globally, but I'm just really going to touch on two things. So the first, I'm going to talk about the cycle really around November, that sprint from the beginning of November into December. So Singles Day has become a lot more practiced here over the last 2 to 3 years. Last year, I would say it was the signal for the first activation of campaigns, so for the sales. Then we have Diwali, which is a big Indian festival. We have a lot of Indian expats. So that follows the day after Singles Day. And then you're moving into the peak period, which is Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So really the message there is what we're now seeing is a lot of merchants are discounting early, really around sort of the beginning of November, all the way into December. And us as your partner, that's really good for us because it helps with planning. And it allows us to ensure we give a very good delivery and experience to your customer, consistent. And especially if you're acquiring a customer for the first time, they get a good experience. Hopefully they come back and buy from you and obviously ship with DHL. But the two big, I'd suppose, local events that I really want to sort of stress on is the two Eids. The first Ramadan was, first Eid was in April, which is Ramadan. That moves every 2 weeks, every year. And towards the last week of Ramadan, you're seeing a huge spike, acceleration of people purchasing online. It could be gifts, could be presents for themselves, family members, friends, etc. So that's a really big opportunity, similar to what you would see on that run up to Christmas and Black Friday. And then the second one would be Eid. That's come around in June this year. We don't see that as being as big, but if you've not started in the Middle East, it's a really good opportunity to try and ride that wave. And that's a good target date for you to set up in the region.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ben. I'll now hand over to Baki to discuss the DHL network that we have over in the Middle East. So over to you, Baki.
Thank you very much, Kerry, and once again, welcome everybody to the event, and pleasure to be with you all today. So a little bit about DHL in the region. We've been here since 1976, so that's good 47 years in total. We cover 19 countries of territory. I'm sure you've seen some of these on the TV, quite prominent for one reason or another. DHL has nearly 6,000 people working across the Middle East in those 19 countries. And we've got over 22,000 customers who trust us every day with their parcels to be delivered in or out of the region. We have a dedicated fleet. We're the only company to have a dedicated fleet of aircraft working for us every day across our two distributional hubs in Bahrain and Dubai. And we are present in over 250 locations, the bulk of which are in the Gulf countries that Ben mentioned earlier. So Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and United Arab Emirates. And across those 19 countries, there are 32 clearance points. Predominantly, these are all at the airport. So wherever our aircraft land, that's where we're able to clear, process, and get the material out as quickly as possible to deliver as we may able to be to serve you. So all of that's across the Middle East, and you can see we handle over 22 million shipments annually, and we've been present, as I said, for 47 years. So a lot of experience through thick and thin, through pandemics, through wars, through a lot of civil unrest as well. So yeah, I think, thank you. So let's go on to our network and just how do we move the material, especially if you've got a package coming out of the UK or Europe and it's got to come into the Middle East. So we have these arteries, our intercontinental fleet, predominantly from Europe, either East Midlands, Leipzig, or through Malpensa. We'll bring the material into Bahrain or into Dubai pretty much daily. And from there, it will connect on a number of our DHL aircraft, or we sometimes supplement it with external movements as well. So there's a number of range of commercial carriers that we will use that complements DHL, whichever is quicker, whichever is more efficient, economical, and provides the best coverage is the most optimal way in which we'll move the consignment. So as I said, we are able to move on our network because we have the capacity. It certainly proves extremely useful during the pandemic to be able to be the only carrier to be able to operate pretty much along in the Gulf and even beyond. You can see on the network map here that we also extend into Asia, and Asia extends into us, and also into Southern Africa. So it's not just limited to the Middle East at all. It's just that we're actually a big stepping stone on that intercontinental network overall. So appreciate that. So thank you. So what does DHL do? So that was the air network you saw. So let's have a look at what we're doing on the ground in terms of investment. DHL spent over 300 million euros of investment over the last few years, ensuring that once the package actually hits the ground, we're able to either transit, clear it, or move it as quickly as possible. Again, most of the concentration of activity has been in that GCC area, which has proven to have the biggest and the fastest area of growth. You can see the countries that were on the map there. So Qatar recently went live at the beginning of last year. We've just inaugurated Dubai World Central, which is the second airport here in Dubai. Abu Dhabi is about to go live very shortly. There's a big investment there. And then Saudi Arabia, which is probably the growth engine of both e-commerce and business-to-business activity in the Middle East, along with the UAE. So definitely, we've strengthened already a rather widespread footprint that has served us well over the previous 46 years. Okay, thank you, Kerry. And then the DHL's main operating hub, distribution center, is in Bahrain, and obviously this has borne the brunt, or I would say the positivity of growth. And we've expanded it significantly. New conveyor sorting systems to allow to transit, move material as quickly as possible throughout the Gulf, and linking all those countries. So there's a new sort system gone in that sorts at 6,500 pieces per hour. There's a whole hub renovation. There's a new country office, and there's a whole range of activities also being planned for the future going forward, with both a new hangar for our aircraft and a potential expansion of another 18,000 square meters to complement what we've already got there. So we're already thinking about the future whilst we're already expanding the present. So I'll pass you back to Ben. Kerry.
Great, thanks, Becky. And we'll cover some key countries with Ben now. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Becky, Kerry. So I touched on really the why, and then Becky really hopefully sort of covered the sort of how, and I'll continue along that theme. So really, as I sort of touched on, there's three major markets within the Gulf. You've got the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. We spoke a little bit about the UAE, so I'm just going to sort of dive into Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and just give you some insights. So the addressable market in Saudi, as I mentioned, is around 40 million people. It really is the growth engine and the powerhouse of the Middle East. The end consumer will spend typically around $500 on an annual basis. If you look at the higher categories, the VIP customer, that number could be north of $2,000. So you will see some of the highest basket values in the world coming from the kingdom. Again, as I mentioned, the economic outlook for e-commerce growth in the region is very, very positive at 17%. And with an annualized e-commerce sales turnover of around $8 billion. The great thing is very easy to do business into the region. So we have VAT in Saudi, it's 15%, and the duty, which is the de minimis value, which basically where you will pay VAT, duty or not, is 1,000 Saudi riyals, which is approximate £215. So that makes it very easy to trade in. A lot of basket values will be under that amount, so therefore you won't be paying duty. Just one point to note is the end consumer, if they have high value orders, may have to register their ID. Now, I just want to put your mind at rest. This is something that the end consumers are very, very familiar with. It's part of doing, shopping in the region, and DHL is very well versed in managing this. So the message I want to really leave you with is very, very easy to ship into Saudi Arabia. You'll get a clean and delivery experience in 2 to 3 days, providing we get the right delivery address and the end consumer's name is very clear to us. So please make sure we get 2 names if possible. But overall, that's a very, very good opportunity for you to explore. And the other thing I just want to point out is the social channels as well. As I sort of touched on, the kingdoms are very, very well connected. You can see that 71% of consumers will be present on Facebook, the Instagram at 44, but interestingly, TikTok at 63. And that number's really accelerated over the last few years as well. So if you want to connect with a new audience, you really want to build up that sort of presence with your brand or product, then these are the social channels that you'll be able to connect with the end consumer using. And again, a little bit like Saudi, Kuwait is a similar market. I would say over the last few years, this is the market that we've seen the biggest e-commerce growth and the biggest change with any of the markets from offline to online. So you can see the end consumers typically spend about $1,300 per annum, with a growth rate of around 13% expected, and a nice healthy turnover of sales around 3.9 billion. So again, with Kuwait, very easy to ship into. The de minimis value is nice and high at £260, and VAT is very clean at 5%. Just point to note is there is an unusual setup for brokerage in Kuwait. So DHL manage that very, very well. The order will get delivered quickly, or there will be a small fee for brokerage that you just need to build into your cost model. But again, you've got a large addressable audience there with very, very, very high basket values, if not the highest in the world. And from a social media usage, it's very even between Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. We don't tend to see Snapchat much in the region, but for Kuwait, it's a very important channel. And then you can see Facebook, 90% of your potential customers are actually using Facebook. So if you're using Facebook ads or things like that, that's a really good channel to be able to attract new customers. And really, just before I close on this, I want to also mention Qatar. I think that's a tremendous opportunity as well. It's growing very, very quickly. And the dark horse in the region, I would say, is Egypt. At the moment, it's not really set up for cross-border e-commerce, but you've got 100 million plus people living in Egypt. There are some currency issues, but consumers are buying online. But the big challenge we see is the tax. So if you're able to address this and clearly point out what the charges would be to the end consumer, which is VAT at 14, and duty could be anywhere between 40 and 60%, the end consumer still wants that product. That is the cost of purchasing in Egypt. But as a merchant, just be aware of that, because if you're doing a landed cost guaranteed option up front with duties paid, you may see some fluctuations. So just be aware if you're looking to expand into Egypt, you need to overcome those challenges. But it's a very interesting opportunity, and one we're certainly watching closely from the UAE. So overall, I think the message to close from my end, the Middle East is in a very, very good place. It's very easy to do business. And I think you can see the investments that we've made from DHL perspective, not only to grow in the future, but what we've done previously to lay those foundations is we were very well placed to be able to support your business to grow into the Middle East. Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks so much, Ben, and thanks, Becky, as well, for covering the DHL network. So I think now we'll go on to a bit of a discussion. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see everybody and what we're going to discuss. And I think, Ben, you covered it really well in terms of the actual opportunity that's there. And I think the key takeaway for me is that it's not just the UAE when you think about the Middle East. There's 19 countries that can be served. So, if you are a retailer on this call today, make sure you are just putting the options on your website to be able to service anyone that comes on to your site from the Middle East. So as I said at the start of the call, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So I can see there's already a few questions in there. So whilst we're just doing a bit of a panel discussion, if you do have any more, just flick them in there and we hopefully will be able to cover them off. So Ben, I think I've got a question for you first. You were talking about the global e-commerce growth rate of 8.9%, but when we were looking at some of those Middle East markets, Israel, Kuwait, etc., there was a massive increase on the global average. Is there anything in particular that you're seeing that's driving that in the region?
Yeah, sure. I think we were a bit behind, as I mentioned, around COVID. That really accelerated, in my opinion, e-commerce 4 or 5 years. But for us locally, that could be 10 years. because we see the percentage of online sales was relatively low compared to the rest of the world. So we're playing catch up. So we're still in an area of growth compared to maybe some of the other regions where we've seen, e-commerce sales starting to soften. Whilst it's reduced for us, it's still seeing, positive outlook. And I think the whole economic outlook of the Middle East is very, very positive. So if you look at any other parameter from infrastructure, investment, it is buoyant. So therefore, you're not seeing the end consumer really make cutbacks. They've got high disposable income. So that gives us a very positive feeling this will continue into the future.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned about like the buy now, pay later scenario, and we know that cash on delivery was a big thing before the pandemic, right? Are you seeing cash on delivery kind of come away from that service and more into those buy now, pay later transactions? And like we have in Europe, we've got Klarna, right? Which I'm sure many people use on multiple checkouts. So it'd be good to understand how that works for the region.
Yeah, sure. To be honest, I mean, I think it's a bit of a myth, right? Cash and delivery. It was prominent pre-COVID. It was more really, in my opinion, a Saudi requirement as opposed to the rest of the region. So if you look back maybe 5 years ago, the percentage of cash and delivery orders were probably as close to 80%, 20% digital payment. So I'll talk specifically about Saudi, where the biggest percentage of cash and delivery orders were. Back in 2019, there was a clear mandate to start to improve the digital offering in Saudi. And since then, they've come up with a direction to be a cashless society. And one of the big changes they made in Saudi Arabia was mobilizing debit cards for purchase online. You couldn't buy on a debit card previously. So the local payment choice is called Mada. That's the debit card there. So once they actually got that up and running online, then you start to see buy now, pay later. Then you see Apple Pay and so on and so forth. Digital wallets obviously as well. We're now seeing the digital payments sort of rivaling Europe in the Middle East. Some of that's still on the doorstep, because some consumers will offer or basically take the option of cash and delivery, but they don't actually pay with cash. They pay with debit card. So credit card's still relatively low, interestingly. It's mainly debit, buy now, pay later, or even bank transfers, we see here as well, depend on the lower category values. But overall, what I really want to stress is I don't believe you need to offer cash and delivery to be successful in this region, for sure. And just actually one other point to note is when I look back to 2018, you didn't have VAT in the region. Then we moved to 5% VAT in Saudi Arabia, which is now up to 15%. You also used to see a de minimis value for duty, $1,000 US. So as a merchant shipping in, you could take that risk. You pay for the shipping, but you don't pay VAT, you don't pay duty. So now if you're doing cross-border into the kingdom, you're going to pay transportation in, you're going to pay 15% VAT, potentially 5% duty. Then you've got to obviously pay for the returns to come back. So you're going to have the return fees, and then potentially, VAT or duty on arrival back into the UK. So the reality is, if you're looking at returns ratios between 20 and 40%, there's no money. So the appetite for the merchant as well is disappeared. So they're more focused on the bottom line than they are top line revenue.
Great, thank you. And I think, for me, it's about giving those customers those options, right? And whatever payment option that they want to use, that as retailers we're given that, and we know the main website platforms and payment gateways offer a range of those to be able to offer to customers, right? Perfect. Thanks, Ben. So moving on to Baki then. So, we saw some extensive investments that we've already done and are continuing to do in the region. I would imagine we've got quite a lot of e-commerce retailers on the call today. What's really the key benefits of some of the investments that we've been doing specifically for e-commerce retailers?
Thanks, Kerry. Good question. So I think the investments are really geared in terms of like speed and efficiency, right? So if we see before even the pandemic, the last mile delivery aspect of it, how quickly can we get the parcels to the courier in order for them to be delivered? We've made some tweaking, adjustments and investments to in some countries, especially as Ben mentioned, when you have these sort of calendar dates, like for example the Eids. So we'll extensively put different shifts on for the evening or for weekends to cope with the demand that comes through. Now, but obviously you've got to get it there first and foremost. So either in the air, which is the aircraft that we've obviously invested in to get us to the point of clearance, or subsequently the actual physical facility that handles it and then distributes it to the last mile location. So there's all of that aspect of the food chain, the transport chain, should I say, is where we've invested in order to make sure that we're really sort of best in class operating platform for everybody.
Perfect. And how does that compare to the rest of the logistics to industry as well in terms of that connectivity and network?
I think one of probably the points that wasn't on the original slide was sort of our market share. We do have a dominant market share. That means people trust us, and people that we're obviously very, very transparent the way we do things, and we tend to meet the promises, the customer promises that obviously we're entrusted in us. So, getting it cleared and getting it out for delivery, being simple and effective. That's not just with the delivery itself, actually, but it's also the paperwork that comes with it, all that customs clearance aspect. So all of that is in our nature to make sure that we can give the best efficient service. And I think the unique feature overall is, there's probably two of them actually, to be fair. One is that air network. We're able to rely on it when other third-party commercial air carriers are not able to do that. So we fly at our own times whenever it's more conducive for ourselves. And that customs clearance, we really have been sort of experts in customs clearance in the Middle East for such a long time. And that allows us, through standard normal practice, to obviously in some cases work alongside customs. I give one simple example. We were the first ones to implement a blockchain clearance process for some of the returns from the UAE to the GCC countries coming back. So it allowed effective blockchain proof that the shipment had actually gone out, and then for it to come back, and then basically to claim back any VAT duty that was paid.
Perfect. Thanks, Becky. Ben, over to you again. I know you like shopping, right? So what's your expectation living in the UAE now if you were shopping from a UK brand in terms of that transit time? What would you say the average consumer is expecting?
Yeah, sure. So I think 2 days is the expectation. We are quite impatient, to be honest, because Dubai is quite a small city. So quick commerce, you can order stuff here and get it in 2 hours, 4 hours. So if I'm buying from the UK, I'm expecting to get that in 2 days. And I think from DHL's perspective, we're well positioned to be able to deliver on that. And we see a huge amount of volume coming in, especially from the big retailers already into the UAE. So consumers are already used to purchasing cross-border. Me personally, I'd expect 2 days.
Great. And I think as well, given about the DHL Express offering and being able to get it into that transit time, you already mentioned about how some of the order values and spends per consumer is relatively high. And, I know in some of our other customers and markets that we've launched to, we've seen an increase again on those average order values just purely from offering the express service. Because when people see that there's that fast transit time there, they tend to put more in their basket if they're paying for the delivery. And I know we've both seen a lot of customers get up to 70% increases in their order value from having those express options. So that's good to know that that's the same in the Middle East as well. And then last question, maybe to both of you, is about the potential barriers that might be there for Middle East shoppers shopping cross-border. Is there anything in particular that can make it difficult to purchase and that we could probably overcome?
I think from my perspective, currency. So trying to localize as best you can. Obviously, if you're entering the Middle East, it's great to have an Arabic transliterated site already. So to be able to converse in Arabic, having the right localized payment options as well. It's not a must, but it's definitely an advantage. I would say from experience, probably 90% of consumers will purchase in English. They may actually start in Arabic, end in English, or English Arabic. So the whole customer journey sometimes can be a little bit confusing. But I would definitely say language, the right payment options. A lot of the time, I see cross-border offerings can be a bit sloppy. They have one currency, The good thing is in the region is most of the countries are pegged to the US dollar. So you don't see big fluctuations. If you have a good payment provider, then they'll help you expand very easily. If you don't, the risk is, you start to see transactions being cancelled as well. So my advice is make sure that the payment provider you've got can help you expand into this region, because there's nothing worse than investing money acquiring those customers. They get to check out and they can't purchase, or the transaction gets cancelled.
Yeah, Kira, just maybe to add to that. So there's probably 2 points for me that are challenges in such. So in Saudi in particular, but also across the GCC, the postal code system here is not quite like in the UK or in Europe, where it's sort of, let's say, more mature, more identifiable. So they are working on it. There's some countries more advanced than others. But so the cleaner, the neater, the better the address, the more effective and efficient it is to get it right first time at the point of delivery, so for the courier. So the address really is fundamentally important, especially if you're sending to Saudi Arabia. There is a mix of potential addresses, from GPS coordinates to a Saudi address system, which is probably got about 5 to 10% usage. So yeah, we really would like to get the merchant to be very, very clear in trying to obtain the address. And alongside that, I would say, is also the declaration. A bit like now we have quite a number of regulations within the EU of invoice descriptions and goods descriptions. The clearer, the better the goods description, the easier it is for customs guys to clear it and understand what it is that's being cleared. So it's not just a general variety that is, sample is, something like that is not. It's just not good enough these days, unfortunately. So those 2 areas, please, would be more viable. Gets it clean, gets it delivered quicker, gets it cleared quicker.
Perfect. Data is key, right? As much information as we can get at checkout is best. Thanks, Becky. Okay, so before we move on to some audience questions, then everyone on the call will be sent the webinar recording after the call. So any figures and etc. that we've quoted today, you will have after the presentation. If you are an existing DHL customer, you can reach out to your local account manager to get the presentation and any additional information and expand into some of these countries. And if you're a brand new customer to DHL, we'll pop our Grow Your E-commerce at dhl.com email address if you are interested in talking to us about expanding into the region. Okay, so let's have a quick look at some of the questions that have come up. Ben, I think I've got one from a couple of the same question actually for you in terms of the marketplaces that are there. You mentioned Noon is a big one in the UAE. What about Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain? Is Amazon still prominent over there, or is there any other marketplaces in some of those countries?
Yeah, sure. So the big ones obviously is Amazon. They've got reach across the Gulf. And as I mentioned sort of earlier, Noon will cover UAE, Saudi and Egypt. So they are the big general sort of marketplaces. But then you have, for example, Namshi, which is a huge fashion marketplace. So they have the most depth and range of any sort of fashion items. I would say they're really the big 3. And then if you start to go into sort of category level, as I touched on earlier, you've got like Faces for beauty, and there's a few other smaller ones. What I can do, Kerry, I can dig up some names and share some examples after the call to you to extend out to people. But they're the major ones. If you're really looking at fashion, I would say go towards Namshi, and maybe there's another one, Civi, which is part of the same group, SIVVI. That's also a fashion marketplace, but it's an extension really, or within the same family as Noon and Namshi.
Great, thanks, Ben. And then another one here is we've got quite a lot about duties and taxes here, and what is the best thing to do on checkout. So I think from the presentation we had the VAT percentages and some of the duty percentages. If you're looking to know what your product's HS codes, duty values are, you can Google that. That's available on public domains. But most of the questions, Ben, are around what would you say from a Middle East consumer perspective on having duties and taxes at checkout? Is it best to have the duties and taxes option on the checkout for the customer to be able to pay there and then, or would people would rather pay duties and taxes on import into the countries?
Yeah, I would definitely say if it's possible, on checkout. For two reasons, especially if I'm a consumer and I'm looking at a UK merchant, I may be making that decision on price. So I want to make sure I know what my landed cost is going to be. If I'm making that purchase going to come from overseas and that product's available, is it going to be cheaper than me buying it locally? So I would definitely have it for that reason. And the second one is the end-to-end delivery experience, right? If you're acquiring a customer for the first time, we turn up, the courier is now contacting the end consumer saying, hey, you need to pay, this 15%, this 5% of duty. It's a surprise, they may have a bad experience that they don't come back. And typically that does cause delays as well. So I would say have that information. And just to Kerry's last point, I think the Golf in particular is very, very easy to set up those instructions on your checkout. 99% of the products will be at a fixed dutiable amount. You may see some HS codes like electronics, maybe shoes, could be higher or lower. But when you start digging into that and checking or using a third-party company who can help you to do the HS code classification, you will realize that you can set up that instruction on checkout. So it's very, very, very easy to do that for the GCC or the Gulf in particular.
Thanks, Ben. Becky, one for you. What are the operating hours for DHL in the region? Are weekends recognised as no delivery on a Friday, or is delivery available 7 days a week?
So not 7 days a week, but so we have different operating practices of a weekend based on each country. So the UAE, for example, is a Monday to Friday operation. So they changed the weekend at the beginning of this year, and subsequently it's a Monday to Friday operation. There are some limited residential deliveries done on a Saturday, but that's really a limited case by case scenario. The rest of the Gulf and most of the rest of the Middle East, it is a Sunday to Thursday operation. So we work basically from Sunday through to Thursday, and then the Friday and Saturday are off. And again, some limited deliveries take place on Saturday and almost zero on a Friday because that's the day of rest. So we do change and tweak those around some of the specific holidays, as you probably would do in any other parts of the world, for specific events that take place. So like I said, the Eid holidays or some national holidays when we have an accumulation of material, then we will take out residential deliveries and make those available either through our service points, through a second wave delivery, or a specially created evening delivery, especially for B2C. But it really is, that's really above and beyond. But the normal working week is Sunday to Thursday, most of the Gulf, but the UAE alone sits on Monday to Friday.
Great, thanks, Becky. So we can remember that when you are doing your shipping dates on your website. Got a great question from Michael for Ben. Should we price in GBP, or would you recommend USD for prices of products on websites?
Yeah, sure. Wherever you can, obviously price using local currency. But if you're going to pick one, pick the US dollar, because most of the countries in the Middle East are pegged to the dollar. So that fluctuation is very, very different, very, very small. So they will be familiar with purchasing dollars. So if you're going to pick one of the two, go with dollars.
Thanks, Ben. And Becky or Ben, we have one. Do customers use service points or depots for their orders, or do they prefer to have a door-to-door service?
It's a good one. It depends on the patience or impatience of the individual receiving the consignment. Some are really desperate to get hold of the consignment, in which case, they'll contact us and say, look, I'll come and collect it. in which case we make the service point available. They get an ODD message, sorry, a message on their phone if you give us a telephone number, and they're given the option to collect it from one of the locations, one of the 215 locations, 50 locations I mentioned. So yeah, in Saudi alone, there's 115 locations. In the UAE, there's over 35. So if you sort of really want to, collect it at your own convenience, or hasten the pickup, then you pick whichever option you prefer. But yes, those service locations are offered to everybody at the point at which they get a message, and they choose whether to deliver it, whether to make an alternative delivery, and part of that alternative delivery is one of our service points.
Thanks, Becky. And then probably one last question I think we have is about returns, Ben. What do you see in terms of returns rates in the UAE? Do customers tend to keep a lot of products, or do they return? And is there any expectations when returning a product?
Yeah, sure. So the returns policies in the region tend to be pretty strict in comparison to what you see in Europe and US. So as a result, consumers don't tend to return. A lot of cases they just can't be bothered, or it's just too difficult. So depending on the category, for example, if it's luxury, then I would have a really good returns policy. Maybe you already pre-print the airway bill and instruction, put it in the order. If it's a lower ticket value, then maybe you can't afford to absorb that cost. You point that out. But I would say have a robust sort of 14-day returns policy. Currently, we're trialing a labelless return solution. At the moment, that's not available, but in the future, we'll be able to operate with a QR code. In most of the countries in the Gulf, that's what we're heading towards, or drop off with QR code to a local DHL location. And the other thing I would suggest, if what we do see, if buy now, pay later is used, then the likelihood of return is very, very low. But just to give you a bit of an idea, returns ratios in the region are probably for prepaid about 5 to 7%. We see for apparel, it could be higher, maybe up to 15-20%. But we do see some luxury sites who would extend the returns policy for up to 6 months, and they're still maybe 15% returns in that period of time. So I'd say that the culture of return is very, very low. If it's been bought, they tend to keep it.
Great. That's good to know, because we know in some other markets that returns can be pretty high and getting up to the 20%, right? So that's great to hear. Okay, we'll go for one last one then. And Becky, this is probably more for you. Where would DHL sit in terms of ease of use versus local players or anyone else in the logistics industry?
I think I saw the question actually, so I think I'm referring to. Bit of a difficult ease of use in terms of DHL is the international cross-border specialist. So if you entrust us with your package in terms of both the quality of the person selling you the information, the person coming along and setting up the account, and subsequently then the physical movement of actually handing your package over to DHL. And I think you'll find that is not a difficult process in terms of it can be maybe bureaucratic, maybe do some checks, but DHL makes that obviously a primary what we call ICCC plus, right? So your interface, your experience with DHL is something we work towards to make as simplistic as possible. Now, being quite honest about it, so some of the local players are very versatile with some of their let's call it some of their applications, but they really are localized. So DHL is a global network, so visibility, tracking, like I give the alternatives for delivery, it's homogenized across the whole world, right? So if you're any part of the UK, any part of Europe, you sort of get the same real-time visibility tracking. And what I can say is the competitors are not as probably as extensive and probably have different outlooks or focuses than just international cross-border. So our strength lies in that cross-border communication, as much as the clearance, as much as the actual physical movement of the package is fundamental in our focus. So we'd like to think that that's exactly what we focus on every time.
Great. Thanks, Becky. Well, I mean, we're nearly at 11 o'clock, so that went by super quick. And I'd just like to say thank you to Becky and Ben for joining and for your expertise. Hopefully, we've got a lot of retailers on this call that have been able to take some good key takeaways. For me, it's there is a huge opportunity in the Middle East that's just ready to tap into just by offering the delivery services and your products on your website to these Middle East customers. So thank you so much for joining. It's been great to have you all here. We will be sending the recording out after the call, so you will have that. And as I say, please speak to your local DHL account manager if you're an existing customer of ours to be able to expand into the Middle East. And if you are new, we still have the Grow Your E-commerce email address where you'll be able to speak directly to one of our e-commerce advisors that will be able to help you set up an account and really expand your business cross-border. As we say, the Middle East is a huge market, but there's many other markets that you can go to as well. So make sure that your website is open to 220 countries across the globe and really expand that global opportunity. Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks guys. See you, bye.
Thank you.